Another approach, I want to present to you another way that someone can determine if they are IA or a reactive IA. Now to do this, I have to reset the whole curve of an organic, loving, marriage-sustaining relationship. I have to kind of set up that whole thing for you, okay? So let's talk about the curve and then we'll get into this. The beginning of the curve is romance. That's the tail on this end. Romance, that playful things you do. You know, you write little songs or send songs or texts. You send notes to each other that say, I'm thinking about you. I love you. I'm glad you're in my life. This could be small gifts, cards, setting up special times, okay? But it's the little things and the big wows that say, I love you, that you send to each other. That's the romance curve. Now, a reactive IA has a history of doing this longer than a year or two in the marriage, as well in their past relationships. So a reactive intimacy anorexic has romantic tendencies, does act on them, does manifest them, and can look back on their behavior and say, yeah, I was really romantic the first year or two of our marriage, okay? And it shows up. Now, an IA may do this in dating, but usually drops off significantly or totally stops within the first year of marriage. Now, you can evaluate this for yourself. Just be honest. How romantic was I? How romantic was I really in other relationships, or did I let the other person carry the ball romantically? In my marriage, early on, the first few years, say maybe 3, 4, 5 years, how romantic was I initiating notes and playfulness and fun things? Evaluate that, okay? And you can even evaluate it as you went through the marriage, because some people are not reactive to intimacy anorexic. They're not. They're married for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're still trying to do the romance. They're still being sensual. They're still, they react a different way, and they might adapt a different way, but they don't adapt this way. So if romance ended really early for you, you might be an anorexic. If it's something that lingered and lingered and lingered and then eventually died because there was no reciprocation, that's usually going to go into the few year mark, all right? The next part of that curve, we're talking about the curve, is sensuality. Now this is the long kiss, the foot, the back rub, the neck rub, the playful touch in the shower. It's giving these touches without any expectations at all for sex to happen. This is just, I love you, I want to play with your body, I love who you are, I love your package, you're awesome. And it's just that celebration of who they are through physical touch. Now for a reactive intimacy anorexia, this would have been organic in the marriage and the romantic relationship, okay? This would have slowly waned over time. Again, like the romance, if you're reactive, you have a history that you can look at and go, yeah, I remember touching them, giving them massages, rubbing their feet, being really sensual without being asked to be. My husband didn't have to ask me to touch his back or kiss his back. My wife didn't have to ask me for a neck rub or foot rub or to give her like that 30-minute touch, okay, while we're watching a movie. I was just doing it. Okay, for the IA, this would be a challenge because sensuality brings closeness and risk and possibly the intimacy of sex, which for an intimacy anorexic would be something they would probably be avoiding. Now remember, I'm saying intimate sex. They avoid intimate sex. Sex as an act, they can do that, they can be disconnected. But intimate sex would have been avoided. And often this sensuality would stop early in the marriage if you are truly an anorexic yourself. And you would notice it in other long-term relationships if you have them, that the sensuality would stop shortly after a few months into the relationship, and the other person might carry the ball. So it looks like that we're being sensual because they're being sensual with me, but I'm not really initiating that sensuality. So again, evaluate yourself on that, because sometimes you can see what you're not doing as an indicator as to whether you are IA or not, because it would be healthy and normal to be sensual. Now, the next part of that curve is initiating sex. A reactive IA has a history of asking for sexual encounters, maybe even being creative about that process. And sometimes they are the only one asking. They want to make love. They want to have experiences of connecting regularly. The IA also can be nonverbal, immature, or a reaction to your complaining or not having sex, or act as a way to stabilize the relationship but not really connect to you. It's just about shutting you up. Also, the making love, being totally present, is very risky for the IA. So asking can be off-putting. Okay, so if you're in the relationship and you see that early on you were really, really initiating, but within months it dropped off, you might be IA. If you're going on for a while, this is going for years, and you're the only one asking, you might be married to an IA, okay? But this is really, really important. Asking, and I know some people don't use their words, and we have a whole lot of information on that, but look at yourself honestly. Do you really pursue your spouse sexually? Now, if you're married to an intimacy anorexic, at some point that might not be fun for you, but there's probably a history early on for probably a few years where that was the case for you. You were showing up that way. Okay, if you're an IA, you probably don't have that history. You might have asked a handful of times, and if you look at those times, they might have been reactions to their pain. They might have been a threat to their marriage. You might have been shamed into it, like where, hey, you haven't asked me for sex for 6 months, and so you show up so you look good. But it wouldn't be this ongoing, generous, hey, I want to be with you, connect with you, I want to look you in the eyes, I want to make love to you, let's get some time together. It wouldn't be that, okay? Now the next part is foreplay. So we've asked for sex, now we're going into the foreplay curve. And this is so pleasurable and intimate for the reactive. The reactive intimacy anorexic loves foreplay. Who doesn't like that, right? They have a history of doing the foreplay and receiving the foreplay in a very good spirit, enjoying it when it's happening for them or if they're giving it. For the IAs, foreplay can be a real challenge, especially if they're expected to use their words, to talk during the sexual encounter, to be present with you, to love you with their words. The foreplay is going to be a challenge because it moves a couple into intimate sexuality. See, sex as object or sex as kind of an act, most IAs can do that because they might be disconnected in their brain, they're not really with you, okay, and they want the physical release. But the intimacy, the connection, I'm making love to you, we're one here, this is so fun. That's what they're avoiding, is that kind of intimacy. So again, you can look at who you are during foreplay. Early on in the marriage, I'm not talking about dating because dating is performance. Early in the marriage, did it stop really quickly? Did it go on for a while? You might still be doing it. And if you're still doing it, you've been married for a while, you're probably reactive, okay? Now, let's go into the sex. Now we're towards the middle of the curve, the end of the curve here. Sex, depending on your sexual expression outlined in the book, Upgrade Your Sex Life, you could have different desires, okay? However, for the reactive IA, there is a history of being connected and verbally engaged during sexual encounters. Now, generally, IAs are more rigid in their sexuality. I can't tell you how many couples who have an IA spouse say, we can only do it one way, one room, one time. 9 o'clock at night in the bedroom, missionary position, that's it. That's all we got, okay? They're generally more rigid. That's not always true, but generally there's a more rigidness to sexuality than there is organicness. And they're less aware of their spouse's desires. They're not even asking you, what you want during the sexual encounter. If this feels good, do you want to be connected? All that kind of stuff. And so during the sex act, who are you? Are you present? Are you showing up? Are you engaged? Are you using your voice? Are you in the process? Are you hoping it gets over soon? Are you disconnected? Now, I will say, if you're not having emotional and spiritual intimacy outside the bedroom, sex isn't going to be that inviting for you, and that's definitely will turn off your desire for sexuality. But in the context of, who were you early on, and are you trying to be present? Because if you're not trying to connect to the person who you're part of at that moment, you might be IA. Whether you're reacting at this point or not, that would be a real tell sign that you're not wanting to be there. After sex, the reactive anorexic has a history in the relationship and other relationships, if they were sexual earlier, of wanting to be close after the sexual encounter. They want to hug, they want to connect, they want to talk, they want to feel your warmth, they want to be there. IAs tend to disconnect after sex. And sometimes even the next day or two, they can create distance and even cause fights. And I had a couple just recently just say, I love sex, but the 2 days afterwards is really hell. He complains, he gripes, he pushes me away, he blames me. It's like I have to pay for the sexual encounter with all this negativity. And that is common with IAs. Okay, for a reactive IA, you would have a history again of wanting that closeness and wanting that connection, and probably feeling really hurt if the IA is pulling away from you after sex, after you really showed up. And so that's another thing you can look at and go, where was I? Where am I? Now, as you look at this full arc of expressing intimacy, you can evaluate how you show up and pursue your spouse. Honestly, this can be a clear way to see the lack of being proactive. Okay, the lack of being proactive is something that IAs would do. That's the active withholding. Now take time to evaluate each phrase that we talked about. The environment, the initiation, the foreplay, the during, the after, all of that, evaluate it. If you are brave and you can ask your spouse their thoughts about your proactiveness in this intimacy and organic relationship, okay, then that might be a helpful conversation to have, okay? And so you can figure this out, be honest with yourself so that you can really evaluate, did I react to IA or was I really IA from the beginning? And maybe my spouse is actually the reactive IA. It's really hard to discern sometimes, all right? But please take some time, evaluate this.